Alright, so in this video we're going to be talking about arrays. Arrays represent collections of both data values and objects that can be stored in a single variable. So let's go ahead and take a look at how those are implemented. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and create a new script. Let's just be test. So the most important aspect of an array is simply the fact that you're able to store multiple values inside of a single variable. Now, usually, like when we're talking about arrays, I guess like the best way to think about them is talking about them as collections. So it's a collection of things that can be thought of as one idea. So just like you might have a collection of trading cards, a collection of stamps, a collection of anything, it's possible for you to think about those individual items as individual items, or you can also think of them as a collection of things kind of like all together that are just kind of like embodied by this one idea. So how do you go about creating an array? So arrays can be created from any existing data type. So any valid data type is appropriate for constructing arrays from. So let's say I wanted to create an array of strings, so a collection of string values. All I would have to do is just create a public string and then array. So anytime that you want to create an array, all you need to do after you specify the data type is just add an open square bracket and close square bracket to the end. And then just give it a name. Now, typically the best names for arrays are plural. So typically speaking, any variable that you create is most likely going to have a singular name to it. So like if you, I don't know, if you had a string called your address or your social security number or even your screen name, all of those are single items. But if you're talking about a collection, now you need to be you're talking about ostensibly more than just one thing. So let's say I was trying to create a string that contained all the screen names of a bunch of players in a particular game session. So here I might just say screen names. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this and minimize it just so I can show you what this looks like when it's associated with an object in the inspector. So go ahead and click on this cube. And I'll go ahead and attach this test script. So you can see here that we have this drop down that says screen names. And so I can provide a size. So I'm going to go ahead and provide this with the size of 3. And you can see that it gives me all these individual elements. And these elements start off with the number 0 and advance forward. Now, the important thing to remember about these numbers is that the highest number is always one less than the size, and they always start with 0. And that's why the previous statement is true. So an array of size 3, or a collection of size 3, starting at element 0 has what we would say 3 elements. So for the first element, I'm going to go ahead and just like throw in some so this is just going to be James, John, and Julie. So those are all the different screen names. I know that for a video game, those are actually like super boring screen names, but whatever. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is open up our script and figure out how we can go about modifying or accessing these data elements manually. So inside of start, let's kind of address a problem here. One of the problems that you run into with using arrays is ambiguity. So previously, where you would just have one single variable that was associated to one data value, if I wanted to print out the value of that data value, all I would have to do is just say print and variable name, like whatever that's called. And then it would just work. Whether this was an integer, a float, a string, or whatever, this would just work. But the problem that you run into with an array is you can't just do that. You can't just say, I want you to print out screen names. The problem being is that you now have one variable that stores potentially a bunch of different values. So what we need to do is provide a little bit more information, and this is where these elements come in. So let's say that I wanted to print out the first element, also known as the second item inside of this array, which would be John in this case. So what I need to do is, instead of just specifying screen names, I need to provide open brackets and then the exact, what we call index or element number of that array. So what we would expect this to do is print out element 1. So we would expect to see John get printed out to the screen when I press play. So go ahead and press play, and there you have it, we have John, which is nice. Now, there's all sorts of different applications for arrays that we're going to be exploring quite thoroughly. But arrays, in short, are wonderful for any time that you want to store multiple data values inside of a nice single collected area. Again, if you're going about creating an array, all you have to remember is that you can make an array out of any valid data type. This can include data types that you've created yourself. So you can have an array of game objects. You can have an array of integers, an array of floats, an array of whatever it is that you want. Anytime it makes sense for you to store a bunch of objects together as a collection. So this can include, you can have an array of players, an array of enemies, an array of power-ups. For any single type that where it makes sense to store a bunch of these objects together, it most likely makes a lot of sense to utilize an array.